I knew something was off the second I turned onto my driveway and saw nothing but open air where my gate used to be. 1 minute, I had a perfectly working, motorized security gate I'd installed just 2 months ago. The next, it had vanished, ripped clean off its hinges, like a bear had come through. But it wasn't a bear. It was worse. It was Elaine Everston, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. Now, I'm not usually the type to jump to conclusions. But considering my history with Elaine and given the fact that someone had left a folded-up HOA violation notice stuck in my mailbox with no envelope, I had a pretty good idea who was behind the vandalism. That woman had been sniffing around my property ever since I moved in 6 months ago. First, it was a complaint about the color of my mailbox. Then it was the non-regulation height of my hedges. Now, apparently, my security gate had offended her suburban sensibilities. I parked my truck and stepped out, staring at the torn-up concrete bolts and the twisted remnants of my gate's control box. This wasn't just vandalism. This was deliberate. I walked up to the front porch, grabbed the violation notice, and read it. Unauthorized security structure in violation of HOA Covenant 4.3b. Gate removed in accordance with Section 9.2 of Emergency Enforcement Authority. Emergency Enforcement Authority? What the hell was that? I'd read the HOA bylaws when I bought the place. There was no such section. And even if there had been, there was no emergency unless Elaine had suddenly developed a fear of automated gates. I'm Isaac Harlan, and I work night shifts at the county hospital. I sleep during the day, and that gate was the one thing keeping package thieves and random weirdos from wandering up to my porch while I was dead asleep. Elaine knew that. She also knew I wasn't around during the day to stop her. I spent the next hour checking my security logs, but of course, the gate camera had been destroyed in the process. That's when I knew I needed to get serious. I wasn't going to let this woman play dictator over my property. So I went full defensive. Picked up 2 wireless motion cameras, thermal, wide angle, the kind you can tuck up under your eaves where no one sees them. One covered the driveway. The other faced the walkway up to the front door. I even installed a third one in the side yard, just in case she tried to get clever. I programmed them to ping my phone the second they detected motion, and I made sure the footage auto-uploaded to the cloud. No more blind spots. No more surprises. 3 days passed. Quiet. Too quiet. Then Thursday morning, right before sunrise, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Front walkway. I tapped the app and watched live footage of Elaine Everston herself in her usual pastel windbreaker and perfectly curled hair, stepping onto my property with a clipboard in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other. She wasn't alone. A man in a reflective vest followed behind her, a guy I recognized as Rudy from the landscaping company the HOA always hired for their beautification sweeps. Elaine pointed at the spot where my gate used to be, then walked up to my porch and started taking photos. Of what? I had no idea. Probably some imaginary infraction she'd invented in her sleep. I watched from the corner of the living room, out of sight. My shift had ended at 3 in the morning, and I was still in scrubs. I could feel my pulse picking up. She wasn't just documenting now. She was casing the place. I waited until they left, then checked the camera logs. Full footage, high resolution, time-stamped. I downloaded the file and saved a copy to a USB drive. I also printed out the HOA bylaws from the official website and highlighted every section related to property access, gate modifications, and enforcement authority. There was nothing that gave Elaine or any member of the HOA the right to remove private property without due notice, a hearing, or a court order. She had crossed a line. The next evening, I paid a visit to my neighbor, Marvin. Retired cop, lived 2 houses down. We'd shared beers out in his garage a few times. I showed him the footage. "That's criminal trespass," he muttered, squinting at the screen. "And destruction of property. She doesn't have the authority to do this." "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Yeah," I said. "I think it's time we reminded Elaine this isn't her kingdom." He nodded and cracked open another beer. "You got a lawyer?" "I've got something better," I said. "I've got receipts." The next morning, I showed up at the HOA office. It was a small converted room inside the community clubhouse with a fake fern in the corner and a single desk at the center occupied by Elaine Everston herself. She didn't even look up. Mr. Harlan, she said, flipping through some papers. If you're here about the gate, the violation notice was quite clear. Your structure was not approved by the Architectural Review Committee, and therefore, you destroyed private property, I said, dropping the printed bylaws on her desk. There is no section 9.2. You made that up? Her hand froze on the page. She looked up slowly. I acted under emergency enforcement discretion, she said, trying to keep her voice even. The gate posed a safety hazard to pedestrians. There's no sidewalk in front of my house, I said. And you had no legal authority to step onto my property, let alone remove a structure without notice. I have you on camera doing it. Her jaw tightened. If you're threatening me. Nope, I said, sliding the USB drive across the desk. I'm giving you a chance to make this right. You pay for the damages full replacement cost, or I file a police report for trespassing and destruction of property. Your choice, Elaine. She stared at the drive like it was toxic waste. I don't respond to ultimatums. Then you'll respond to the sheriff. And with that, I walked out. I didn't bother looking back. I had a feeling this was far from over. 36 hours after I walked out of the HOA office, a county sheriff's deputy knocked on my door. It was mid-afternoon and I'd only gotten about 4 hours of sleep after a rough night shift. Still, I was wide awake the second I saw the badge. Isaac Harlan? He asked, glancing at the clipboard in his hand. That's me. I'm Deputy Lanning with the county sheriff's office. We received a report of unauthorized surveillance equipment installed facing a public right-of-way. He paused, eyeing the small camera mounted discreetly under my roof's eave. Would you mind explaining the purpose of those devices? I didn't blink. They're on my private property and face only my driveway, porch, and side yard. All within the legal limits. You'll find the necessary permits filed with the county planning office. Surveillance footage is stored locally and remotely as per standard security protocol. I can print the documentation if you need it. Lanning hesitated, then nodded. That won't be necessary. Just doing our due diligence. Can I ask who made the complaint? He looked down at his clipboard again, hesitated, then met my eyes. Elaine Everston. Of course. I leaned against the doorframe. That woman illegally removed a security gate I installed on my own property. I've already submitted a report for criminal trespass and destruction of private assets. I've got time-stamped camera footage and HOA bylaws showing she had no authority to act. Has that been reviewed yet? He raised an eyebrow. You filed that with the precinct downtown? 2 days ago. I handed it to Officer Marquez. She said it would be assigned to a detective. He tapped his pen against the clipboard. Right? I'll make a note to follow up. Please do, I said, because if Elaine's trying to get ahead of what's coming, she's going to need more than fake complaints. That night, I met with Marvin again in his garage. He'd already pulled a few favors with his old buddies in the department. Turned out, Elaine had tried to file a protective order claiming I was harassing her with surveillance, and that she felt endangered by my aggressive behavior. The judge had tossed it within an hour. She's trying to flip the script, Marvin said, pouring us both a whiskey. She knows she screwed up. Now she's just throwing mud to see what sticks. I took a sip, then pulled a printout from my folder and slid it across the workbench. This is the inspection report from the gate installer. When Elaine had it ripped out, she damaged the underground power conduit. That's going to cost me an extra $1,600 to replace. Marvin let out a low whistle. You get estimates for the total repair? Just shy of $5,000. And that's not counting the new wireless system I had to install after she destroyed the original control box. He tapped the paper thoughtfully. You ever hear of Title 32, Section 8 of the State Property Code? Can't say I have. Unlawful interference with security installations. It's a felony if the equipment was part of a safety measure for a home occupied by a shift worker, elderly person, or someone under protective watch. That gate was part of your night shift routine, right? Exactly. Marvin gave a slow nod. Then she's not just looking at trespassing and vandalism. She may have just stepped into felony territory. The next morning, I made a formal request with the county clerk to subpoena HOA meeting minutes from the last 6 months. I wanted to see if there was any record, any mention at all of a vote on my gate or any emergency enforcement powers being granted to Elaine. The clerk, a woman named Doreen who clearly didn't care for HOA politics, handed me a flash drive with everything I needed. There's been a lot of complaints from your neighborhood lately, she said as I signed the paperwork. You're not the first one to come in here asking about Elaine Everston. I raised an eyebrow. Really? She leaned in slightly. Last month, someone else filed a petition to audit the HOA's financials. Said their dues kept going up, but the books weren't adding up. Then the petition disappeared. No vote, no hearing. Just gone. I drove home with that flash drive burning a hole in my pocket. Back at my place, I plugged it into my laptop and started combing through the files. It didn't take long. There wasn't a single mention of my gate, no discussion about emergency enforcement powers, and no vote authorizing any action on my property. In fact, in the last 3 meetings, Elaine had submitted multiple motions to amend the bylaws to grant herself more unilateral authority, every one of which had been rejected by the board. She'd taken matters into her own hands anyway. But that wasn't the worst part. Buried in an appendix labeled Miscellaneous Notices, I found a letter addressed to the HOA board from a resident named Lyle Pennington. In it, Lyle claimed that Elaine had authorized over $20,000 in landscaping improvements, without board approval payments that had all gone through Rudy's company, the same Rudy who'd followed her onto my property. I forwarded the letter to Marvin and added it to my evidence folder. Then I called Lyle. He answered on the 3rd ring. "I've been waiting for someone else to say something," he said after I introduced myself. "She's been laundering HOA funds through fake invoices. Rudy's not even licensed. He's her nephew." I blinked. "You're serious?" "I've got the canceled checks and the original maintenance contracts. I sent them to the HOA board, but Elaine shut the whole thing down. Claimed I was misinterpreting the budget. Would you be willing to go on record?" There was a pause. "Then if you're planning to take her down, I'll be the first in line." With Lyle on board, I reached out to 2 more neighbors I knew had butted heads with Elaine: Marcy, who'd been fined for having a bird feeder, and Tom, who'd been forced to repaint his fence twice in 1 month. I didn't have to say much. As soon as I mentioned legal action, both were ready to testify. By Friday, I had a full packet prepared: video evidence, repair estimates, financial inconsistencies, and 3 sworn statements from residents. I sent it all to the county prosecutor's office. Then I got a call from Detective Ruiz. "I've reviewed what you sent," she said. "We're opening an investigation into criminal misrepresentation, trespassing, and potential embezzlement tied to unauthorized disbursement of HOA funds. We'll be contacting Ms. Everston for a formal interview." I leaned back in my chair, the tension in my shoulders finally starting to ease. What's the next step? "We're putting a hold on all HOA enforcement actions until we finish our investigation. In the meantime, if she contacts you directly, let us know. And keep those cameras rolling." 2 days later, every resident in the subdivision received a printed notice in their mailbox. Not a violation, but a notification from the county clerk's office. The HOA board is under audit, pending an active investigation into financial misconduct and unlawful enforcement practices. Residents are advised to suspend compliance with any new directives issued by board members until further notice. I stood at my mailbox reading it when Marcy walked over from across the street. "You really lit a fire under her, didn't you?" she said, grinning. I folded the notice and tucked it into my pocket. She ripped out the wrong gate. That night, as I reviewed the new footage from my cameras, I saw Elaine walk past my house without stopping. No clipboard, no walkie-talkie, just a stiff gait and a face that looked like it had bitten into a lemon. I didn't wave. I just watched. By the following Tuesday, a county vehicle with a blacked-out seal on the door quietly rolled into our neighborhood and parked near the clubhouse. No lights, no fanfare, just 3 plainclothes officials stepping out with briefcases and clipped IDs. A few residents peeked through windows. I stood in my driveway sipping coffee, watching them approach the HOA office like it was a crime scene, which, frankly, it was. Elaine didn't open the door. One of the officials used a key. I didn't need front row seats to know what kind of storm was brewing in there. Elaine had built her little empire on fake infractions and intimidation, but now the county had the keys to her kingdom. I spent the day reviewing installation plans for an upgraded security gate. Not just a replacement, this one came with reinforced steel posts and biometric entry. If anyone tried to mess with it again, they'd need more than a clipboard and a landscaper in a vest. Late afternoon, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't law enforcement this time. It was Ted Rankin, the HOA board's treasurer. His shirt was untucked and he looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. "Isaac," he said without looking me in the eye. "Got a minute?" I didn't invite him in. Just stepped onto the porch and let the storm door shut behind me. "I'm listening." I wanted to apologize for what happened. I didn't know Elaine had ordered anyone to touch your property until after the fact. She didn't bring it to the board, just claimed she had emergency authority. "She didn't," I said. "And I know you know that now." He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "The county's going through our records. They've already found 6 checks to Rudy's landscaping company that never matched any work orders. They're combing through every financial transfer we made over the last 2 years. And how did that happen without the rest of you noticing? She kept most of the documentation in her personal files. Convinced us it was just temporary until the new treasurer software came online. I should have pushed back harder. "Yeah," I said. "You should have. I want to make this right. The board's holding an emergency meeting in 2 days. Elaine's being suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. We're inviting residents to attend and speak." I didn't respond right away. He looked like a man trying to stop a dam from bursting with duct tape. "You better come prepared," I said finally, "because people aren't just mad. They're done." He gave a stiff nod and walked back down the steps without another word. That evening I got a call from Detective Ruiz. "We executed a warrant on the HOA office this morning," she said. "Found a locked filing cabinet with a second set of books. Elaine's been siphoning funds into a maintenance emergency fund that doesn't exist in the charter." "How much?" "Preliminary estimate is just under 30,000. We're still verifying. But here's the part you need to hear. Rudy's company filed a business license only 6 weeks ago. Prior to that, he was unregistered and uninsured. Any work he did on your property was unlicensed." I didn't need to say anything. She continued, "There's more. We found a receipt for a bolt cutter purchased the day before your gate was removed. Paid in cash, no signature, but the timestamp lines up with your camera footage. We're submitting it as corroborating evidence." The county prosecutor's office is preparing charges. What kind of charges are we talking about? Criminal mischief, falsifying financial records, unauthorized use of HOA funds, and interference with a security device tied to an occupied residence. If convicted, she's looking at multiple felonies. The line went quiet for a moment. "She's lawyered up," Ruiz added, "but it's not going to help her much." 2 days later, the clubhouse was packed. The emergency meeting started precisely at 6, and for once, Elaine wasn't at the center of the room. She wasn't even present. Her seat was filled by a tall woman in a navy pantsuit, an attorney representing the board's interim leadership. Ted opened the meeting with a shaky announcement about restoring transparency and rebuilding trust, but no one applauded. People wanted answers, not speeches. Marcy stood up first. "My bird feeder was cited as a violation of wildlife safety," she said, holding up a photo of the small wooden feeder that had hung from her porch. "But now I find out it was just an excuse to levy fines so Elaine could pad her slush fund." Tom followed, holding a manila folder full of documents. "She made me repaint my fence 3 times in 8 weeks. Said it violated color codes. I checked the actual guidelines. There's no such code. She made it up." One by one, residents stood and recounted stories of fines, threats of liens, and unapproved citations. Some had paid out of fear. Others had tried to push back and been ignored. When it was my turn, I didn't bring evidence. I brought impact. I work nights. I see people at their worst: overdoses, crashes, trauma. I come home in the morning and all I want is to sleep in peace, knowing I'm safe. Elaine ripped my gate out like it was garbage. She didn't notify me, didn't vote on it, didn't even ask. She just destroyed it. I scanned the room. Every eye was on me. She didn't enforce rules. She imposed them. She didn't protect this community. She exploited it. You all know it now. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The room was silent for a beat. Then someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the whole room was on its feet. The board voted to freeze all enforcement actions, suspend fines issued within the last year pending review, and hire an independent auditor to examine the HOA's books. Elaine's name was removed from all official HOA documents. Her access to funds and databases was revoked. The next morning, I installed my new gate. This one was stronger, quieter, sleeker. And this time I had a permit posted in the window, signed and sealed by county authorities. Around noon, Rudy's truck pulled into the neighborhood, but he didn't get far. 2 officers intercepted him at the corner and escorted him out. No handcuffs yet, but the message was clear. His days of playing enforcer for Elaine were over. The neighborhood started to change after that. People who never spoke before were out on porches chatting. Residents started organizing a true neighborhood association, one that didn't hide behind threats and fake bylaw amendments. They even asked me to join the new oversight committee. I said I'd think about it. A week later, I got a letter from the county prosecutor's office. Elaine had been formally charged. 3 felony counts. Her arraignment was scheduled for the following month. She tried to claim the gate was a hazard, but the judge wasn't buying it. Especially not after the footage I submitted showed her smirking while standing over the busted control box. I never saw her return to the neighborhood, but her legacy left a deep imprint, one that we were slowly digging out of brick by brick. And me? I sleep better now. Not just because of the new gate or the upgraded security system, but because I know that if someone ever tries to tear down what I've built again, I won't be the one caught off guard. They will. A week after the emergency HOA meeting, the clubhouse's bulletin board, once a shrine to Elaine's printed decrees and passive-aggressive flyers, had been stripped bare. In its place was a single laminated sheet posted by the interim board. A call for resident volunteers to form a community oversight committee. I didn't volunteer. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I had something more important to finish first. The gate was up and running now. The new biometric scanner worked without a glitch, and the reinforced steel posts were sunk deep enough to survive a hurricane. I'd even added a discrete license plate reader tied to the camera system. The whole setup was feeding directly into a secure cloud server that I could access from anywhere. I hadn't built a fortress, but if anyone tried pulling what Elaine did again, they'd be walking straight into a digital bear trap. On Tuesday morning, I got a call from Detective Ruiz. She showed up to her pre-trial hearing with 2 attorneys and a binder of what she claimed were community testimonials. She said, "We reviewed them, all unsigned. Most were typed in the same font with identical formatting." "She forged support letters?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter, still in my socks. "Looks that way." Her lawyers are already trying to pivot to a mental health angle. Stress, overwork, community pressure. The usual. Is that going to work? Not with the financial records we just got. I wiped a hand down my face. What now? She rerouted HOA funds into a shell maintenance account under a fake LLC. The owner of record? Her own name slightly altered. Middle initial switched. Address off by 1 digit. But it's her. I whistled quietly. How long was she doing that? The first transfer was 18 months ago. Started small. A few hundred here and there. Then larger amounts. Landscaping contracts, sidewalk repairs, even a community security audit. That never happened. Altogether, just under $38,000. I pulled a chair out and sat down. She pulled it off for that long? Because the board trusted her. And she made sure no one asked too many questions. What's the next move? She's being arraigned again, this time on financial fraud and forgery. Bond's going to be set higher. Her lawyers are working overtime, but she's cornered. I didn't feel satisfied. Not yet. Something about the way she'd operated still didn't sit right. She hadn't just broken rules, she'd built a system that let her do it in plain sight. She'd trained the neighborhood to look the other way. I opened my laptop and pulled up the footage from the day she'd destroyed the gate. I'd watched it so many times already, but this time, I noticed something odd. After Rudy had finished cutting the support bolt, Elaine had paused by the side of the driveway. She made a call on her walkie, but then she stepped toward the hedge line and looked down at something. She bent over, adjusted something near the ground, then turned and left. I zoomed in. It wasn't much, but I caught a glint of metal. A small black object, half hidden under the bushes. I grabbed my gloves and headed outside. It took a few minutes of digging through the mulch, but I found it. A tiny magnetic sensor, the kind used for triggering gate alerts. But mine had been removed during the destruction and replaced with this. A second model, not part of my original system. I pried it loose and took it inside. A few hours later, Marvin came over with his laptop and a signal reader. "She planted a tracker," he said, holding up the device. It was transmitting over a closed band frequency. Short range, but enough to ping a receiver if she had one nearby. Why would she do that? She wanted to know when you were home, or more importantly, when you weren't. I stared at the tiny device on the table. She planned the whole thing down to the hour, I said. Not just the gate. Everything. Marvin nodded. This isn't just overreach. This is surveillance. Illegal surveillance. I bagged the device in a plastic evidence bag and called Detective Ruiz again. When I handed it over at the precinct, she whistled under her breath. This confirms it, she said. We'll add illegal electronic surveillance to the charges. That's a federal violation. She's in real trouble now. That night, someone knocked on my door just after 9. I checked the camera. Lyle Pennington, the former HOA member who'd first sent the letter about Elaine's fake invoices. I let him in. I thought you should see this, he said, handing me a thick folder. Inside were photocopies of HOA checks, dozens of them, each one signed by Elaine and made out to dummy vendors for services that had never taken place: community rodent control, private security coordination, emergency sidewalk de-icing. She forged approval signatures from board members, Lyle said. I compared them to the ones on file. They don't match. Where did you get these? I used to be treasurer before Ted. I kept digital backups. Just in case. I stared at the fake vendor names. She was building a whole imaginary infrastructure, I said, to justify draining the account. She wanted total control, Lyle said. And she almost had it. I made copies and sent them straight to the prosecutor's office the next morning. By Friday, word spread fast. Elaine had been taken into custody after violating her bond terms. She'd attempted to access HOA files through a third-party login, one she thought hadn't been revoked. The system flagged it immediately. Within 2 hours, a judge issued a bench warrant. She was arrested at a strip mall just outside town, wearing sunglasses and trying to close out a P.O. box registered to the fake LLC. The news hit the local paper's front page. HOA president arrested on fraud, illegal surveillance, forgery. Residents demand reform. The article quoted residents across the neighborhood. Some were angry. Some were embarrassed. Nearly all had the same question. How did she keep it hidden for so long? The following week, the interim board held a second meeting, this time with a full forensic accountant present. They presented the full scope of Elaine's fraud: $37,922 misappropriated across 23 transactions. 6 of them had been laundered through Rudy's fake business, which was now under separate investigation. The board voted unanimously to remove Elaine's name from all HOA records. Her home was being prepared for foreclosure. She hadn't paid dues in 3 months, and the legal fees were mounting. Marvin and I stood near the back of the room, listening silently. Think she'll take a plea? I asked. She'll have to, Marvin said. Jury's not going to swallow the overworked volunteer angle when they see all this. I nodded. You hear what the board's doing next? Yeah. Full bylaw rewrite. Residents will vote on every section. No more unilateral enforcement. No more secret contracts. Every fine, every notice transparent and appealable. About time, I said. A week later, I got a letter from the county prosecutor's office. Elaine had accepted a deal: 15 months in state prison, 5 years of probation, and a full restitution order. She was also barred from serving on any HOA board again in the state. The restitution would be paid out in installments, deducted from the sale of her house and any future income. It wouldn't cover everything, but it was a start. On a quiet Saturday morning, a moving truck pulled up to her house. 2 men loaded boxes while a county official supervised. By noon, the place was empty. The blinds were drawn. The mailbox had been taped shut. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand. For the first time since I'd bought the house, the air felt different, lighter. Marcy passed by with her dog and waved. You thinking about joining the new board? She asked. Not yet, I said. But maybe I'll oversee the security contracts. She laughed and kept walking. I went inside and looked over the footage from the night before. No alerts. No motion. Just the hum of the gate and the soft glow of the perimeter lights. Peace didn't come easy in this neighborhood, but it was earned. And I'd made sure no one would rip it away again.